Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome to part 2 of how to program in Python. Today we are going to be looking at variables and comments. I know, it's very exciting stuff. So if you remember in the last video, we left off right here with our Tik-Tac-Toe game. We added a nice welcome message and a nice underline here, and this please select a menu option. Now, one of the things before we can select menu options, one of the things we need to discuss is variables. And what a variable is I like to think about it as just a placeholder for a value. So what I am going to do here is I'm just going to make a new file in my project, and I'm just going to call this variables.py. And so what we are going to do is we are going to declare and use our first variable. So last episode we learned that you can use print and you can pass words into it. So there's our hello world. Just like that. Now, what happens if you want to have multiple hello worlds? So I'm going to do, or I select this line in Visual Studio Code. I can do Control C and then Control V to paste a couple times. I have 4 hello worlds. Let's go ahead and run this. So if you remember the command, it's Python space, and I can type var and press tab to get an autocomplete on my file. Press enter, and I get my hello world 4 times. What if I don't want this to say hello world anymore? What if I want this to say hello Chicago? Well, now I have to go through and change every single one of these by hand to hello Chicago. Now if I run it again, by pressing up on my arrow pad and pressing enter, I can get the command again. Now I get hello Chicago. With a variable, I'll add a couple lines at the top, and I will type hello is equal to hello world. So let's take a look at this syntax. Right here on line 1, we have hello, single equal sign, and then our value. So hello is a holder for hello world. Now what we can do is we can come in here, and I'm going to replace all of these with hello. And now if I come in here and run it, you can see we get hello world again. Now if I want to change it to something else, let's not do Chicago this time. Let's do hello Mars. I only need to change this in one place. Now when I come in here, I can press up, and we get hello Mars. Variables can hold a little bit more information than these string values, or these words. I can have a variable named 5 and set that equal to the number 5. I can have a value called true and set that equal to true. Now this is, you don't want to do something like this. This is bad practice and bad naming. But what if I called this dollars? $5. And what if I called this did the sun rise today? It did, so that's true. So variables are placeholders for values. Now, when you're naming them, kind of like how I had said before, you don't want to name this 5. And you don't want to name a value of true to true. Like that's not very descriptive. You want your variables to, or your variable names to give some kind of insight into what the value actually is, or what its expected values actually are. Like if I have a variable here called dollars, I expect this to be a number. I don't expect it to say General Kenobi. That doesn't make much sense, does it? Let's change that back to 5. Variables really make your code a lot nicer and a lot easier to maintain. So I'm going to leave this file, and I'm going to go back to our Tik-Tac-Toe. And what I want to do for our variables is I want us to start thinking about, okay, what kind of data are we going to need to reuse in this app? The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come to line 1, and I'm going to create a variable called divider. And I am going to set that equal to this guy. And I'm going to do a print divider. Now, whenever I need to print these dashes, I can just call divider instead of having to type this in or copy and paste it every single time. But let's think in terms of the game now. What do we need in the game in terms of information that we would want to store? Well, we would probably want we would probably need a variable for the number of wins for X and a number of wins for Y. So let's make 2 up here, and let's call this num wins X is equal to 0. Num wins Y is equal to 0. Oh, sorry. Nope, that should be O's. I don't know why I said Y. So those two are going to hold how many times X or O wins. What else do we need? We are probably going to want a holder for our current turn. And if I remember the official rules of Tic-Tac-Toe, I think X always goes first. So what I'm going to do is current turn is equal to X. We'll save it. Now, don't worry about single quotes and double quotes right now, or even these different types of values. We'll be going over them in the next episode and what they are and how to use them. Right now, what we're doing is just practicing declaring variables and seeing how we can use them in our application. So right now, we have a variable called divider that we are using to make our output a little bit nicer to read. We have 2 variables called numWinsX and numWinsY, which are going to hold how many times the X player wins and how many times the Y player wins, or the O player wins. Sorry, I don't know why I keep saying Y. And then we have a variable called current turn, which just is going to tell us whose turn in the game it is. Now, what if we come back to our code, now maybe a couple days from now, and we're like, oh man, I forgot what numWinsX is, or I forgot what numWinsO is. Well, this is where we're going to use comments. I'm going to go back to variables to show this. A comment is a line of text that the language ignores when you run it. In Python, we can declare a comment by typing a pound symbol, and then I can say this is a comment. You can see it's kind of grayed out here. You can't really, well, you can't use it. It's for humans to be able to read. That kind of comment with the pound in front of it is called a single line comment. If you want to have longer comments on multiple lines, you could do 3 quotes. All right. There we go. Python doesn't like it when your indentations are off, but we'll get to that way later. Don't worry about that. So a multi-line comment is going to have 3 quotes on the top and 3 quotes on the bottom. This kind of syntax is also used in what's called a docstring. You saw that little pop-up I had for generate a docstring. Well, all that does is it lets you give a little bit of a hint to whatever it is you've written. So if I hover over this, that little pop-up there is the docstring. And you usually use these, or this kind of notation to say that that's a docstring. Now, we're really going to be using single line comments mostly. So let's go back over to here, and I'm going to go a line above, and I'm going to add a comment here, and I'm going to say divider line to make our output easier to read. Okay? I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say variables to hold wins per player. Actually, we could even simplify that. We could say holds. And for this one, we're just going to say holds the current turn. Commenting your code is a really good idea for a number of reasons. Number one, it lets you remember what you did when you could have written this, a year ago, but if you have good comments on it, you'll remember what your code does. The comments should make it clear. Number two is it lets other people figure out how to read your code too. So if somebody else decides to work on this project and they look at your comments, they would be able to quickly figure out what does what and what goes where and what things are supposed to do what. Now, as you get more advanced and as you do this longer, you really are going to be doing less comments like this and more of explaining more complicated logic to make that a little easier to read. Usually it's good practice to try to make your variable names as explicit as possible with what it's doing. And when we get to functions, making your function's name as explicit as possible. Now, this docstring is going to be, we're going to use this later when we get to functions. But again, right now, just ignore it. That doesn't matter too much. So now we have a pretty good setup here, I think, to actually start creating the rest of our game. We have a nice divider that we can reuse to split out our... Oh, sorry, I completely forgot to run this again to show that that actually worked. We'll just do Python Tik-Tac-Toe.py, and we can see... Here, I'll clear my console and run that again. And we can see that we get the same output we did yesterday. It's not terribly exciting, but it gets the job done. What we've done today is we created a variable that holds a dividing line that we can use to make our output easier for our players to read. We created 2 variables to hold the number of wins that each player has while they're playing the game. And we have 1 more variable that holds whatever player's turn it is, whether that be X or O. In the next video, we're going to be going over more of these variable types and what you can do with them and how to use them. And we are also going to be looking at conditional statements. So if, else, how do we get from one place to another. If you like the video, please rate, comment, and subscribe, and I hope to see everybody in the next one.